Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a narrative that honestly feels less like history and way more like the script of the world's most dangerous geopolitical thriller. I want you to picture the Middle East for a second, but not as a bunch of flat, abstract lines on a map. Think of it as a deeply immersive, high-stakes cinematic landscape. Imagine the bustling, vibrant streets of 1970s Tehran seamlessly morphing into the ultra-high-tech, deeply fortified war rooms of modern Tel Aviv. Because today, we are going to unpack the staggeringly complex relationship between Iran and Israel. It's this incredible, sprawling story of survival, of brutal betrayal, and of a very fragile trust that eventually shattered into a conflict literally capable of reshaping the entire global order. Okay, let's dive into this. What if the two nations pushing the world toward the absolute brink of World War III were actually once secret allies? I mean, it sounds like straight-up fiction, doesn't it? Because today, we see these two countries as absolute, lifelong foes, right? Just locked in this endless, terrifying cycle of threats and retaliatory strikes. But if we peel back the layers of history, we find a partnership that was forged completely behind closed doors. It's a massive historical paradox. For decades, these two countries were actually sharing intelligence, advanced technology, and energy. They literally needed each other to survive. So to truly grasp the terrifying escalation we're witnessing today, we absolutely have to understand the secret love story that came first.
Act 1. The Unlikely Bedfellows. To really get how this alliance worked, we have to travel back in time to the 1960s and 70s. The Middle East back then was completely dominated by Arab nationalism. You had leaders like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, and his whole goal was to unite the Arab world and basically push out any non-Arab influence. So in this landscape, Israel and Iran were the ultimate outsiders. They were surrounded by hostility, feeling totally isolated. Pre-1979 Iran, which was led by the pro-Western Shah, had this grand, ambitious vision of transforming into a dominant military power, but they needed cutting-edge tech. On the flip side, you have Israel, practically fighting for its daily survival. They had the advanced tech and military know-how the Shah desperately wanted. But Israel needed energy. They needed oil to run their tanks, their fighter jets, and their entire economy. So it was kind of a perfect, albeit highly secretive match.
So how did they actually make this partnership work in the real world? Well, the answer is 254 kilometers. That is the exact length of the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline. You see, in 1967, right after the Six-Day War, the Suez Canal was blocked. Israel was desperate for oil, and Iran really wanted to sell its oil to Europe without having to send massive ships all the way around the continent of Africa. So what do? They build this massive, 42-inch wide secret pipeline. It's crazy to think about, but it was basically a hidden circulatory system keeping both of these nations alive. Iranian oil tankers would quietly pull up to Israel's port of Eilat down on the Red Sea, pump their crude oil directly into this pipeline, and shoot it 254 kilometers across the desert to Ashkelon on the Mediterranean, where it was then shipped off to Europe. Actually, at one point, this completely covert pipeline supplied 90% of Israel's entire oil needs. 90%.
And, the trust between these two ran so much deeper than just trading oil. Consider something called Project Flower. Started in 1977, this was a highly classified joint initiative worth $1 billion. The goal? To develop a state-of-the-art ballistic missile with a 200-kilometer range, and get this, one that was fully capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. Israel needed the cash to advance its missile program, and Iran essentially footed the bill, hoping they could get backdoor access to Israel's closely guarded nuclear technology. I mean, they were quite literally building the foundation of a modern military powerhouse together, completely under the radar of the rest of the world.
Which brings us to Act 2, the Shadow War.
So everything, and I mean everything, changes in 1979. The Islamic Revolution sweeps through Iran, totally ousting the Shah, and this new regime comes to power fundamentally despising the West and especially Israel. Literally overnight, these vital allies became bitter enemies. The secret pipeline was seized, and diplomatic ties were just violently severed. But Iran knew something crucial. A conventional head-to-head war with Israel and its main ally, the US, was basically unwinnable. So Iran comes up with a brand new doctrine. They called it the Ring of Fire, or forward defense. Instead of fighting at their own borders, they started exporting their revolution. They funded and trained proxy militias right on Israel's doorstep. They built up Hezbollah up north in Lebanon and heavily supported Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Palestine. Imagine this sort of bloody invisible highway stretching all the way from Tehran, cutting through Baghdad and Damascus, straight into Beirut. By setting up this proxy network, Iran effectively encircled Israel without ever having to officially declare a conventional war.
Now, Israel, obviously, was not just going to sit back and wait to be surrounded. They were absolutely terrified of one specific scenario, an Iranian nuclear weapon. And that brings us to January 2018, to an operation that feels like it was ripped straight out of an Ocean's 11 script. Under the absolute cover of darkness, Mossad agents somehow infiltrated this totally ordinary-looking commercial warehouse right in the middle of Tehran. And in exactly 6 hours and 29 minutes, talk about a ticking clock, they disabled the alarm systems, sliced right open 32 massive reinforced safes, and managed to extract half a ton. That's 500 kilograms of top-secret Iranian nuclear archives. They smuggled 55,000 pages and 163 CDs out of the country before the sun even came up. It was just a breathtaking show of Israel's total, unwavering commitment to stopping Iran's nuclear ambitions cold.
But the Shadow War didn't stay as just daring espionage for long. It quickly evolved into these terrifying, almost sci-fi level assassinations. Now, what's really interesting about this is how far the technology had come by 2020. That year, Israel targeted Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the chief scientist running Iran's nuclear program. But they didn't send in a traditional hit squad. No, they used a highly advanced, satellite-controlled robotic sniper machine gun that they had mounted in the back of a pickup truck. An operator sitting comfortably in a control room thousands of miles away in Tel Aviv identified the target and literally eliminated him while he was driving. And they did it with such chilling, pinpoint precision that his wife, who was sitting right next to him in the car, was completely unharmed. This massive psychological blow pushed Iran's patience to the absolute breaking point.
And that propels us into Act 3, the eruption.
Because by this point, the shadows were just growing way too thin to contain the violence. The era of those secret assassinations and proxy skirmishes, that was over. It was quickly replaced by this staggering, runaway timeline of escalation. It really kicked off in April 2024 when Israeli F-35s bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, instantly wiping out top Revolutionary Guard commanders. This wasn't a shadow strike anymore. Military analysts were calling it open surgery. Iran, of course, retaliated with direct strikes right on Israel, and this intense tit-for-tat spiraled straight into the terrifying 12-day war in June 2025. We're talking unprecedented direct exchanges of ballistic missiles and drones filling the sky. But incredibly, even that was just the prelude, because as diplomatic negotiations kept collapsing over and over, the whole situation snowballed, and by February 2026, the region finally crossed the threshold into total war.
On February 28, 2026, the world watched an event unfold that fundamentally altered the course of global history. Israel made the calculation that this conflict would literally never end as long as Iran's current regime remained intact. So they executed a massive decapitation strike, using specialized bunker buster bombs, the kind specifically designed to penetrate deep underground. Israel struck right at the heart of Tehran. The attack successfully eliminated Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with his family. Now we have to look at this objectively. This was not merely a tactical military victory. It was a direct attack on the very soul and ideology of the Iranian regime. State television announced his death, and massive, completely unprecedented chaos instantly erupted across every single major city in Iran.
And the global ripple effects, they were immediate and they were devastating. Energy markets just went into absolute freefall as the Strait of Hormuz was threatened, completely shutting down Qatari and Kuwaiti gas and oil production overnight. The United States, which got drawn deeply into the conflict, suffered really severe military losses. We're talking multiple downed fighter jets in Kuwait and the loss of 16 highly advanced MQ-9 Reaper drones. Meanwhile, internally, the regime in Iran rapidly mobilized. They appointed Mojtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader to basically pick up the mantle, continue the fight, and execute these fierce retaliations all across the Gulf.
To really grasp the sheer gravity of this moment, it helps to look at the U.S. political perspective at the time. It was summarized in a statement by then-President Donald J. Trump on April 7, 2026. He stated, and I'll read this exactly as it was documented, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. 47 years of extortion, corruption, and death will finally end." Reading that, it really underscores the absolute existential stakes of this conflict. This wasn't about minor border disputes or proxy skirmishes anymore. It was being viewed by global leaders as a definitive, civilization-altering clash, something that would permanently rewrite the map and the entire future of the Middle East.
Which really leaves us with this final, kind of haunting question. What if? What if the Islamic Revolution had never happened? What if that secret pipeline in the desert was still quietly pumping oil today, and those billion-dollar missile projects had actually united them rather than divided them? If that geopolitical love story hadn't turned into an absolute nightmare, would the modern Middle East actually know peace today? History shows us, time and time again, that alliances can flip in an instant. Yesterday's most vital partner can easily become tomorrow's existential threat. It's a profound reminder that in the world of international relations, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. Thank you for joining me on The Explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the headlines.